Hello and welcome to Pulse, your podcast delving into all things health, innovation, digital and data. Proudly brought to you by Pulse IT News. I'm your host, Louise Shaper.
And I'm your other host, George Margellis.
George, I saw you last week, but only briefly. Digital Health Festival was crazy. There were so many people that were texting saying, hey, let's catch up in Melbourne the night before. I didn't see them the whole 2 days. Was your experience like that?
Pretty much the same. I came back and people sort of went, weren't you at Digital Health? I go, yeah, I was there for the whole 2 days and I spent the whole 2 days on the trade floor. We didn't bump into you. But they say 8,000 people and lots of presentations and seemed like a really successful event. But I didn't go to the rave party. Maybe that's what I missed out on.
I went and decided my feet were too sore.
Yeah.
I went somewhere else where I could sit down.
My feet decided that from 4:30 p.m. that they needed to sit down.
Yes, so the second day I wore much more sensible shoes. But I did note this year that Digital Health Festival is definitely growing because this year they gave us carpet. So I was congratulating the owners and saying thanks for the carpet. You know, that I appreciate that rather than the cement floors.
That's true. And I did notice that after the first hour or two, the coffee machine lines were getting shorter. So it was able to get a couple of cups of coffee during the event to keep me going.
Yeah.
Overall, like I said, the startup area was good. The quality of presentation seems to be improving. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I did 3, but it seems to be a pretty good quality presentations, and just the sheer number of them simultaneously was always a bit of a challenge. Even with the app, I could never work out where I needed to be.
It's so much. If I was the organizer, it's like if you go to 3 days, it becomes even more expensive for everybody to be there. So 2 days is a good mix, I think. But yeah, 10 stages all happening at multiple times, and the coordination involved in that is substantial. But yeah, it makes it very difficult. I ended up just this weekend, just gone, like a week after the event. I was like on the app messaging everyone who had messaged me that I hadn't got to see. And I was like, here's my contact details. I'm sorry we missed each other at the event. There's just too much going on.
Overall, a good 2 days. It's good to catch up with a few people in Melbourne to see where we're off to next year.
Well, there'll be Melbourne again. I think they always do Melbourne at Digital Health Festivals. So May next year, everyone put it in your diaries. And George, has anything else been happening in your life?
Look, it's been a hectic couple of weeks. Like I described 2 weeks ago, we've had the son with a broken ankle. So we've been watching the progression of that and learning how to do physiotherapy via physiotherapy online. So that's been interesting. That's been good. When I got back from the Digital Health Festival, that evening I was on a panel with the ECH Alliance's 5 Nations event, which was the 4 nations of the UK and the Republic of Ireland. And they graciously included the colonies in the discussion, which was nice of them. The discussion on social care. It was an interesting discussion because we tend to think of the UK as fairly advanced when it comes to their social care model. And they do have a different model to us in that it's much more localised. But as I described the Australian system, they were fairly positive that ours was pretty well up there as best of breed. And despite all the doom and gloom we hear here about our aged care system, it's actually pretty good on a global standard. And as you know, anyone who's involved in aged care is panicking about July 1 when the new act comes into place and a whole new model of care comes into place. But we're doing okay. But those same issues that everyone seems to have, fragmentation, workforce, interoperability, are pretty global. And the Irish contingent highlighted the fact that we did tend to pinch a lot of their nurses and bring them over here.
Sorry, not sorry.
I said, look, once upon a time you shipped them in ships. Now they're coming over voluntarily. So it's only fair.
Yeah. My personal trainer that I used to have, he's an amazing guy, and always listened to the podcast. When we would catch up in the mornings, obviously, and he'd tell me about his weekend, he was only hanging out mostly with Irish people. And I hassled him about it once. I'm like, have you got any Australian friends or non-Irish friends? And he's like, oh, there's a Scottish guy. Because I said, is there anyone left in Ireland? And his take on that was basically no, everyone's here. And why not? It's such a great place to be. So sorry, Ireland.
We apologise, but keep on sending them over.
Yes, that's right. And George, on your webinar, was there any talk about the renaming of our Commonwealth Department of Health and Aged Care? Because now it's the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. So a new acronym.
I did raise it, hot breaking news, the inclusion of disabilities. Our social care model really seems to cover all aspects of the care, which they thought, again, was quite exciting because their system tends to be quite fragmented. Even on a call I was with the department earlier in the fortnight, they're still getting their heads around now what the right acronym is. It was DOHAC for so long. Now what do we call it? There's too many letters.
Yes. How are we pronouncing that? Yeah, that's two. There's all consonants. It's not good for the last. It's not going to work. Okay. Anyway, we'll have an update on the next show and we'll see. We'll make some phone calls, find out how we are supposed to be pronouncing it.
I will be seeing the Chief Digital Information Officer next week, so I'll ask her about what they're going to do about her naming about it.
Yes. Let's make sure we get it right. Okay, well, talking about the department, they are the topic of our first hot topic. So let's get started, George.
Let's go for it.
Friend of PulsePod, First Assistant Secretary Daniel McCabe from the newly named Department of Health, Disability and Ageing gave an update on how Share by Default is going at the Digital Health Festival. Now, as reported in Pulse IT, McCabe said that switching My Health Record to Share by Default is already paying off. And he pegs the first year savings at a conservative $11 million just from fewer duplicate pathology and imaging tests, with millions of records now flowing into the system. So it really goes to show that interoperability isn't obviously just a technical exercise. It can save real dollars and reduce repeat needle sticks for patients who, let's face it, if we can do less of those, that's a good thing for everyone. Did you manage to catch Daniel's talk, George?
I did. So Daniel managed to get the talk in the main stage and he did a very good presentation. It was quite enlightening. And for those people who sort of haven't been following in detail, he gave a great summary of what's been happening over the last 12 months. And I know, straight after him on some of the smaller stages, Simon Cleverly and Amanda Catamol, and even a bit earlier in the day, Peter O'Halloran has spoken. So there seems to be a focus on doubling down on getting the health information exchange and My Health Record model working together and developing an integrated care. And we heard a bit about the 1-800 Medicare, which everyone thinks will obviously have to be renamed because there's far too many letters in that one to work with.
Well, yeah. On the naming, I do, because I like 1-800 Medicare, like when we spoke about it, because I think it's recognisable, but it hadn't occurred to me. And yes, when I spoke with some people at Digital Health Festival, people were thinking 1-800 meant that was the phone number, like way too many digits. And it really just needs to be like 3 digits.
And they introduced how that concept will fit in. So I think there's lots of sort of things coming together. And kudos to Daniel and his team within the digital transformation. They actually do have a focus on digital transformation within the department. They're bringing it all together. The challenge, of course, still remains that fragmentation. So they can do some great work from their side of things, but then we still have to manage how the state government's EHR systems fit in and primary care. So there's still a way to go. And there's still, when we start talking about allied health workers, that they've got so many different systems. So many of them have no system in place. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's exciting. They've got a strategy. They've got a plan. They've got people excited at this senior management level and senior leaders level. As we discussed at the last one, the fact that the government's got a second term means we're not going to see any major discontinuities. The only change we saw was the change of the aged care minister for a new aged care minister, but one of his first statements was that they're continuing on with the plan as it is. So I think we're looking forward to an interesting and exciting time from the federal government's perspective in digital health. The question is, can we get rid of some of those fragmentation issues? And as we've said a number of times, and I experienced it myself with my son's hospitalization, the fractured business models and trying to work out how to all do it still remains a challenge.
Yeah, that's much bigger than just pure interoperability as a technical thing. But yeah, it was great to see that the benefits are really tangible, because that'll just encourage the demand from all to continue on that path. At a personal level, I had to have a DEXA scan because I told you about my GP sending me off and do it. I've been a very good patient. I've been doing all my homework. So I had to have a DEXA scan, a bone scan, not because I had any symptoms, but just, again, she's like, that time of the life, hormones are changing, Louise. Like, but a good idea. So I go get it done. And my dietitian emailed me late on a Friday night. When I say my dietitian, I've had one appointment with this woman. And again, she was so amazing. And so she's emailing me on a Friday night, hey, have you got your DEXA scan results yet? Because that would be helpful for me to see. And so I was like, oh yeah, they'll probably be in my health record now. And they'd just been unlocked the day earlier, I realised. Anyway, my results are terrible. My bones are not good. Anyway, so not good. I'm still working out what I do about that. But not only could I share that report with my dietitian who read it and gave me advice, like she emailed me back on a Friday night going, okay, Louise, this is what we need to start looking at diet-wise, blah, blah, blah. When you go see your GP, talk to her about these things. And one of them was blood tests that I should probably have. And I thought, well, my GP is amazing. So it means I can't get into the next day. Like I usually have to wait weeks. And I had the next appointment booked. So what I was able to do is I made an appointment with the GP on the Monday, got in straight away, and I explained to this other GP and I said, look, I'm sorry, I actually have a favourite GP, but you're my second favourite GP. But I said, this is what's happened, and she could see my health records, see the DEXA scan and the bad results I got. So I said, I want to be proactive and get the blood tests that I need so that when I go to see my primary GP, she'll have the results. And so it's extra information for her rather than wait another time. Anyway, so everyone was really great. She was like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. She sent me off for way more blood tests than I've ever had. But then when I went to see my actual GP, she didn't know that had happened, but she'd seen the DEXA scan results and she's like, yeah, we need to talk about this. And I said, oh, I've also gone and been proactive. I've had these bloods done. And she was quite shocked, I think. But she was like, okay, let's go, because we were in another treatment room. Anyway, and she's like, well, let's get back to the computer and let's go through them. And then we went through all my results. And yeah, it was really, really helpful. So again, thank you, Daniel McCabe, and everybody at the agency and the department who are making these things happen, and everyone that passed the legislation, because it was only a small thing, not life-threatening, obviously, but it was so helpful for that issue that I was able to be proactive about it rather than finding out when I went to my GP that my bones are not in a good shape.
So it's interesting because, again, we still describe the My Health Record as a bit of a shoebox of PDFs. They're reforming that. But the reality is, as that system evolves, and with the use of things like agentic AI tools, I mean, that should have been able to pick up on your DEXA scan, say, here are the blood tests that are recommended for someone with these results.
Yes.
Automate that process. Send you off an SMS saying, turn up at the lab at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday to get your bloods done. There is opportunities for us to streamline the process. It just means thinking outside the box. And the fact that you had go to a separate GP to really just get a set of blood orders, but the fact that your dietitian's involved as a part of that multidisciplinary team is very exciting. And I think you're a great example of what the future of healthcare maybe look like, Louise. You may well be the poster child.
Well, I don't know about that, but I love the agentic AI. We will be talking about that a lot in a future episode, I think, George. So staying in Australia, the New South Wales government has published the report from the Special Commission of Inquiry into Health Funding. The report contains 41 recommendations over 12 broad areas. And it was fantastic to see the report explicitly called out elevating prevention. The very first recommendation is, and I quote, preventative health should be made and remain over the long term a whole of New South Wales government priority. So, George, that's two governments now, New South Wales and Victoria, that last week said their vision is fewer hospital admissions up front because we dedicate resources to keeping people healthy. And yes, we talk about this all the time on the pod. What will it take for significant business model changes in healthcare so that prevention and health span are actually prioritised? Do you think we're getting there now with New South Wales and Victoria saying this stuff?
Look, at least we're starting to talk the talk, which is a start. I do note the Victorian health budget came out last week as well, and most of the money was being spent on new hospitals. So I guess we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. New South Wales is interesting. I mean, we love our big commissions. The last big commission here was in 2008, which was the Garling report, and that had a big look at the New South Wales healthcare system. It really described a pretty horrific culture where there were some real problems amongst the workforce and the internal culture. And there was a whole bunch of reforms put in place. But I don't know if you saw the news a couple of weeks ago, but the junior medical officers in New South Wales were out on the street carrying placards and going on strike. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
And didn't psychiatrists quit as well?
I think 3/4 of the senior psychiatrists in the system have quit. And to a large degree, it comes down to funding in that public-private split. You can make a lot more money in the private sector than you can in the public sector, but we still tend to get the really hard cases coming to the public sector, and it's a complex world. This report was really good. I must admit, I ran it through my AI tool to get the summary, and you're right. I mean, preventative care came up as a major focus. I searched through it to look for what they meant by preventative care, because it's easy to say we're going to deliver preventative care, but from a public hospital perspective, what does that mean? And does that mean a bigger public health investment? Does it mean pushing stuff off to the primary care system and paying them to not admit patients? Is it a more holistic model of care? Hopefully. They did state it had to be a universal care system. And one of the things they did highlight in the report is lack of funding. There's not enough money in place to deliver a lot of the things they want to deliver. And the other problem with preventive care is that it really has a long return on investment. So
very long, hopefully.
That's right. And the idea is you start preventative care for people in their teens and their 20s, and that means you push off chronic disease till their 80s or 90s. But very few governments have a 70-year budget cycle. So I think at least it's opening the discussion. And I think it may well be something we can bring up in discussion in future podcasts. What do we mean by preventative care? Do we mean short-term preventative care? Do we mean long-term preventative care? Are we going to get everyone on the 120 supplements like our good old friend Brian Johnson? I don't think that's quite what the government had in mind, but there's a lot of need for definition here. The other thing that did come up in that report was interoperability again. And there's a big discussion around the New South Wales Single Digital Patient Record Project. That's such a big project, and what that's going to mean as far as interoperability. But we saw a number of people online commenting that it is a hospital record. It's not really a longitudinal patient record. And when you do look at how Epic has implemented longitudinal records in other parts of the world, they do that by replacing primary care systems with their own, not necessarily integrating. So it'll be interesting to see. I will be honest, here in New South Wales, there are a couple of schools of thought which think it may not have been the best decision. At the same time, we were struggling with a fairly fragmented local area health disconnect. So it was a big decision by the department and the government, and the new government's running with it. So we'll have to watch and wait that one. But there's a lot of money still going into EHRs. And if you saw Simon Costa's presentation at Digital Health Festival, he was talking about the post-EHR era. We're still sort of a bit stuck in that EHR era.
Yeah. Well, thank you for raising that single digital patient record. I saw that in the report, it called that out, but incorrectly said, it's going to be this one longitudinal record for everyone, and it's not. And I've seen commentary online where people are like, no, you forgot about primary healthcare. So it can't really be a single record if primary care isn't included. And I thought it was worthwhile us having a chat about it, because some of the commentary I've seen, they don't seem to understand that it wasn't an oversight. Like New South Wales government didn't go, oh, we'll just completely forgot about primary care, the GPs and community-based physio and the rest of them. Like, they didn't forget about them. All of these things come down to the business models of healthcare and the culture of healthcare. And so from my perspective, if New South Wales really wanted to have a longitudinal record where, George Margellis and Manuel Margellis has one record no matter where they visit in the New South Wales system, of course primary care would have to be included. But primary care is funded not by the state governments, that's funded federally. And even if the magic happened and the Commonwealth and the state government of New South Wales agreed on a joint funding structure to create this, great. But then you've got the culture of medicine there. So that would mean every GP, every allied health professional, everyone basically who's outside of New South Wales Health, if they're running electronic records, they would have to change the software that they're using. And try to get clinicians to change their software is incredibly challenging for a bunch of reasons. So what do you think? Because it's not like they were forgotten about. They weren't included on purpose.
One of the things they did with their single digital patient record project was actually bring a GP in as one of their medical director team and look at that issue. And the issue was the fact that there is no way within New South Wales legislation to enable GPs to share records with hospitals effectively because of their various privacy requirements, yet alone, rewarding GPs for doing so, because that cuts across the federal state divide issue. And these are actually constitutional issues. These are written in the Constitution, what we can and can't do. And then when you look at some sort of places in the United States, for example, who sort of do this fairly well, Cleveland, Mayo, they basically control the whole stack. The primary care doctors, the secondary care doctors, the allied health team, the home nursing teams are all employees of the same organisation. Very few GPs are employed by New South Wales Health. We have seen a couple of attempts, and it's interesting now with our good friend Richard Taggart there, who spent some time at Calvary, which was a more integrated type service. So, and Richard, even when he was at Sydney Local Health District, was looking at more integrated models of care, but the money comes out of the same bucket And that's the same bucket of money that the psychiatrists are complaining that there's not enough money to pay them. And it's the same bucket of money that the junior medical officers are saying they're the lowest paid junior medical officers in Australia. So increasing the size of the bucket becomes a challenge. We're much better off than what we were 10 years ago. And I used the example last week, my son went to an urgent care clinic, which is a federally funded primary care service, but they integrated really well with the local hospital to make sure that the information that they got and the diagnosis they made, realizing it needed hospital care, the hospital was informed before we got back from the x-ray that he needed to come into the hospital for the next stage. So I think individual cases, they do it quite well. Systematizing it and making sure things don't fall through the loop are going to be part of the challenge. But we are at least seeing an improvement in culture. And if Victoria is going to have robots and agentic AI, then New South Wales is going to have it too.
That's right. You guys are going to have to catch up. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the idea that we have to make everything interoperable, like in New South Wales' case, well, everything has to interoperate with Epic. It's like, yeah, that can happen. That's easy, but that is not Epic's business model. That is not in the contracts that New South Wales government would have signed with the company that they chose to provide the single digital patient record. So I think we need to evolve our thinking on interoperability to what I understand the Health Information Exchange is aiming to do, which is instead of, your primary record is that hospital-based record. It's actually, there's one George Margellis. You've got a healthcare identifier. So we know you're the one and only George Margellis. This is your number. And the idea is your information, whether it was during a hospital stay and collected in what they are saying is the single digital patient record, or it's a GP visit or a physiotherapy visit, an urgent care clinic, your data can be matched and then uploaded to create, that's the idea behind the spine. But the idea is everything has to plug and play with a hospital record. I think, no, whatever software you're using, you have to plug and play with a generalised infrastructure that, in Australia's case anyway, would be set by the government.
We're going to continue to iterate how that looks like. But the reality is, even the shoebox full of PDFs would have been a lot more valuable if we had all the PDFs in there. So it's that culture of making sure that all information is shareable. And if PDF is the lowest common denominator for sharing, well, it's better than nothing. And we need to continue to develop on that. And yes, we'd all love atomic data, but then we need to think about what does that mean from a clinical perspective? Because if it means an overflow of data that everyone has to go through each time they see a patient, that's going to slow things down.
No, it needs to be properly curated. And again, agents, AI will be able to do a lot of that and create beautiful dashboards that are based on what me as your dietitian or me as your physio or me as your GP, what's most relevant for me in that context, or indeed for me, the patient as well.
Again, if you look at the way healthcare is funded in Australia, there is no MBS item for a GP to summarise your record and turn it into a contextual document. They're paid to document each time they see you and do that. So again, we need to start thinking about the My Medicare stuff that came out a couple of years ago with Steve Hambleton's group, sort of looked at more effective multidisciplinary teams. And AI, we've seen the huge growth of scribes, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that more in the future, but maybe those tools should be used to make that clinically relevant document summary. And we need to standardize on that clinical relevant document summary type model. There's still work to be done. So I think we shouldn't be too disheartened thinking, oh my God, where are we? If we look at what's happening now compared to 30 or 40 years ago when I first started in this game, we've gone forward in leaps and bounds. And that's reflected in our longevity and it's reflected in the types of care we deliver. But hey, we can't rest in our laurels.
No, still lots to be done. We've been focusing on the Australian government, so now we're going to fly over to Silicon Valley, because in Silicon Valley, there have been a heap of new developments. So firstly, 23andMe. Now, that's a company we've been following since PulsePod started. It's a fascinating story with many lessons to be learned, specifically for startup founders and investors. 23andMe went from a $6 billion valuation to a failure to generate a sustainable business model, which meant their only way out was a sale. Well, less less than 4 years after their $6 billion peak valuation, 23andMe is being scooped out of bankruptcy by a company called Regeneron for $256 million, so a little bit less than $6 billion. What do Regeneron want? Well, basically, they want the 15 million sample genetic database. And, Big Pharma, they see this as a prize because that curated genomic data is drug discovery fuel. And so they've paid just over $250 million for it. What do you think about this one, George?
They were actually valuing it at less than $18 million. So the fact they got 256 suggests that Regeneron does see something in that data that they have that they can maybe have used. Regeneron did a little bit of research and they seem to be quite an exciting pharma company. They're not quite big pharma, but they're getting there. I think they probably have made a significant investment in their own organization by grabbing this genomic database. The one thing I do suspect is that there's going to now be a whole bunch of legal cases around the privacy aspect of that data. So I'm sure people who have put their DNA into 23andMe may well be questioning what's going to happen with that DNA. And I'm sure there'll be a number of law firms looking for a couple of pounds of proverbial flesh in that discussion.
Not in America, really?
Never. So that should be interesting.
Well, they have said publicly, I believe Regeneron have said publicly that they plan on abiding by whatever the privacy use of data restrictions were when people signed up to 23andMe. They plan on following that same. But, I guess they don't have to. So we'll wait and see.
My old colleague, Eric Dishman, who was running the big genomics database project in the US, they were only looking at 500,000 people. So we're talking 15 million people here. And it's a much more global data. And again, depending on what sort of secondary data they got associated with it, this may well be that opportunity for genomic-based precision medicine to come to the forefront again. 25 years ago when Craig Ventner and the team sort of did the first genome, Bill Clinton said that this was going to revolutionize medicine.
Yeah.
To date, the number of genomic diseases that have been solved are very, very limited. So I think we're still very much in its infancy. This may well be the kicker for it. And maybe Regeneron would be the one that does that. I'm sure now that one pharmaceutical company has this database, other people are going to want to try and have an equivalent database. And whether there's through mergers and acquisitions or through lots more people swabbing their cheek, that should be interesting. But I think it's exciting. I love the name Regeneron. In itself, it sounds like something that's going to make a huge difference in the world.
It does sound cool.
Could be a Transformer in the next Transformer movie. We'll see how that plays out.
Okay, then. All right. Now, next story. Now, given our guest on the show today is FemTech queen Ida Tin, I wanted to draw attention to Rock Health co-founder Hayley Tecco's viral article, which slams the minuscule VC share that reaches female health founders. Tecco's piece, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes, her piece does note that there is a rise in the dollar amount and the number of deals to women's health startup at seed and Series A, but the bar is still super low. She found in the US data from Rock Health that 7% of digital health funding dollars goes to female health startups. Now, most of the analysis is around usually 4% of funding goes to women founders, regardless of industry. It could be in fintech or agri-tech or anything. 4% of VC funding goes to women. But in Hayley's analysis, she calls out the growth stage funding cliff for companies that have a product in market. It's going well, but now they need some serious dollars to scale, which is basically a Series B funding round. And that's when the funders almost entirely disappear. In the US, only 5 women's health startups raised a Series B or bigger in the last 2 years. And one of Tecco's recommendations is to talk about this issue and raise it in rooms that matter. So we're doing that here, George. Do you see this situation improving anytime soon?
It's a challenging area. Default term is VC bros, and I think we need to move beyond the VC bros to VC people and make it more generic. From what I'm seeing in Australia, we seem to have better than that average. I know, Louise, you're actively involved, and people like Amandeep Hanser and many others have managed a higher profile. I haven't seen the dollar figures. I can't comment on that, but I think it really comes down to a matter of becoming gender blind on this and doing things, bringing people into play more effectively. And yet, when you look at healthcare expenditure, women control 75 to 80% of healthcare expenditure. So it's a bizarre model that the people who are spending the money aren't represented by the people who are trying to make the tools that makes the money.
Exactly. You've got 51% of the population are women. We know that women's health is severely under-resourced, and it has always been. And, the scientific community is just waking up to the fact that women are not just small men. But like you said, they do control the majority of the healthcare dollars. So you would expect to see, and actually Hallie Tecco calls this out in her article, that, given the size of the market and the opportunity, if women's health made up even 10% of digital health funding, that would be a reasonable benchmark, and that you'd see something like 100 women's health deals per year, not 49 across 2 years, and, more people investing in these later rounds. And I thought it was interesting too, one of the things she said, which I think would be reflected globally as well if we looked at the Australian and the UK data, for instance, is that the funding sources, like investor capital funding sources that have set up specifically to promote and invest in women's health, they're usually much smaller funds. So as you get, you're successful, but now you really need to scale and be much bigger, then you need bigger checks, and you usually need at least one investor to lead the round. And those women health specific funding sources just don't have those sort of check sizes available to them. So, we really need more capital at every stage in this journey.
Yes, no one's actually questioning that the quality of the product coming out of female-founded startups is inferior. It's the VC system which seems to be the barrier. So again, we need to really look at that and think about how we fund in a gender-neutral way projects. And that means we need more females working in banking and in other sectors to drive that change. Again, we have seen an improvement. I mean, obviously, once upon a time, the idea of having a female clinician was perceived to be bizarre. And now the majority of people in med schools are women. So we are seeing changes on that side of the cultural aspect. But the VC bros are still hard to break, I guess. Maybe if you start smoking cigar and drinking whiskey and, dressing like the guys in Wall Street, that may be the secret.
Yeah, I really like it, but it's not helping my cred with the tech bros, even if I can share a whiskey with them.
I have to say that my career as a VC is obviously tainted because I don't like whiskey. I'd much rather have a pina colada with a piece of pineapple and an umbrella personally. But
that's it. We just need to change the culture across the board. I like it. All right, George. Well, thanks for that. It's been really great chatting with you on these topics. And now we have a quick break. And when we return, we will be talking FemTech with the legend who coined the term, Ida Tin. Today, we are thrilled to welcome a true pioneer to the show, Ida Tin. Ida is an entrepreneur, author, and the visionary who coined the term FemTech, forever changing the way we think about technology designed for women's health and well-being. As the co-founder and former CEO of Clue, one of the world's leading health apps for women, Ida led the charge in reshaping conversations around menstruation, fertility, and reproductive health through data-driven insights and female empowerment. Her work has really inspired a global movement and opened up new possibilities for how technology can best serve women's bodies, choices, and lives. And in today's conversation, we're going to be diving into Ida's journey, the evolution of FemTech, lessons learned in building such a massively successful company, and her thoughts on the future of women's health innovation. Ida, wonderful to have you here. Welcome to the Pulse Pod studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you on board, Ida.
Now, Ida, you are credited with coining the term FemTech and pioneering the $1 trillion FemTech industry. I'd love for you to take us back to that moment. Like, what was happening at the time for you that made you realise that this new category needed a name? And I'm also curious that when you look back now, why do you think the name was so powerful? And at the time, did you have any idea that it would take off in the way that it did?
So I had been invited to be on a panel at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco in 2016. It was the first time that they were doing a panel on female health. It was scheduled in the morning after the big party, but nevertheless, it was there. And I was researching to see who the other panelists were and what they were building. And I was really curious how they were describing what they were doing, because I could see that we were kind of neighbors. And I knew that I was really struggling to describe what Clue was, because we were a period tracking app, but I felt we were much more than that. We're doing scientific work, we were doing all kinds of things. And I looked at all these web pages of the panelists, and I could see that the language was kind of all over the place. And I thought, what if we could have something that would make people understand that we are sort of part of the same thing that is happening in both culture and technology? And I was running around at this conference before the panel and trying to do micro user research and asking people like, hey, if there was this term, would you be comfortable kind of having this label? And you know, I got to speak to, I don't know, maybe 5 founders, and they're like, yeah, that sounds fine.
Oh, cool.
So then from stage, I was like, we need a term for what we're all building, and it should be FemTech. And then my co-founder said, we should make a Wikipedia entry and we should trademark the name so that somebody can't take it and use it only for themselves. So we made it a commons good. And I don't think I really understood how much it matters to have a word that people can kind of orient themselves by. I think it has helped people find each other. But there was also a really practical reason why I wanted this term. I had pitched to many VCs, all of them almost male. And I noticed that I wasn't really using the word menstruation or period ever when I was pitching.
Oh, yeah.
I was talking about things that felt like I would bridge over to their world. I would talk about data. I would talk about science. I would talk about privacy. I would talk about marketing, all kind of things that I felt we could have an open, shared, easy conversation around. But I also knew that these partners would have to stand up on their Monday partner meeting and present this investment opportunity. And I was a bit sort of, how are they going to do that without that being a cringy moment? And I thought, what if they had a word that would be really easy to say, like FemTech? They could just say FemTech. So that was part of that. And to your question about whether I'm surprised, I think, yes, I am. And what I realized is that, of course, it's not the power of a word. It's the fact that there was something that culture was really ready to crystallize. And a word just became that one grain that something kind of revolved around.
And I guess the sense of community as well, that having something that you feel that you belong to or you want to be part of.
Yes, that's huge, because many of these founders do feel a little bit alone in the sort of tech world. I think it's been really important to create this cultural shift that I see happening really globally around women's health, where people are starting to kind of conceptually move it out of the niche bucket to something that is really significant. And I think of female health as sort of societal infrastructure at this point. It's foundational. It's like the opposite of niche.
Exactly.
Great. So you started Clue in 2012, and I understand the app currently has over 15 million users from 180 countries. Back in 2012, smartphones weren't that common and or that popular, and their app stores were pretty confusing to use and relatively new. What inspired you to create Clue at that stage?
I should say that I think the official number is about 10 million. I don't know if we are at 15. So,
okay, 10, 15, what's 5 million?
So I was really puzzled that there had been so little innovation in family planning methods since the pill came out. And I was sort of angry about it, because I felt this is a really, really central thing in women's lives, to have agency over how many children she has, but also as a species, it's a really important question of how do we decide how many people want to be on this planet. And, you know, there had been so much incredible innovations since the pill came out in the late 50s. And I was like, how is it possible that nobody has really cared about this thing? I knew that I'd had a lot of side effects from trying the pill. I felt I'd tried everything and nothing was great. So I wanted to create something in that space. And I didn't have a smartphone myself. It was way too expensive for anything I could kind of dream of having at that point in my life. And I still felt it would be this sort of really intimate place where you could capture and access this really intimate health data. So I wanted to build a home diagnostics to measure our hormones in saliva. Spent 4 years trying to do that. But then again, my co-founder said we should start by building a period tracking app in parallel, because hardware is hard, it takes forever. So we did that. And after 4 years, we decided to leave the hardware project behind. Over the years, we understood that we could do the same, but without the hardware, with only data. And eventually got FDA clearance as the world's first 100% digital type of birth control. I think it was 21.
Impressive achievement. And you make it sound so easy. Oh, yeah. And then we got FDA approval. It's blood, sweat, and tears that probably literally went into getting to that stage.
The team went an extra 1,000 miles. Nobody had signed up for a job that would require them to do thousands of pages of boring tech documentation and transform how we did everything. It was grueling. In fact, it was so grueling that by the end of it, we were out of money. We desperately needed to either raise money or make money. That was also when the economy kind of sank and the whole tech world went from just get lots of users to, hey, make money and build a sustainable business model. So we had to do a hard U-turn and actually build features that we could earn money on fast. And contraception is not a fast product. That is something that takes a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of going through the regulatory process.
I do a lot of work with startups, and one of the first things they often want to know is, how do you get to your first 1,000 customers? You know, because when you're starting out, you're just so excited that you've got a team around you, and then you're excited that maybe you've convinced someone to give you some funding, but you realize, well, this is just all the start. You know, how do I get people paying money and at a scale that will help us grow? So what was your experience of that?
So we had paid to do a 3-minute presentation at a tech conference, also in San Francisco, to say, hey, we have launched, and we got 7,000 downloads, and we were thrilled. And then after a few days, we're like, okay, what now? And then pretty early, we hired a really brilliant American woman, and she got us onto YouTubers, as they were called back then, influencer marketing. And this was a really effective growth channel for us for many years, because these women could speak about this product with a lot of authenticity because they were users themselves. It is also a money thing, right? You raise money, you can spend money on digital advertisement. And we can see that some of our competitors who raise more money and were more aggressive, and then it becomes a snowball effect. Then you have great numbers, you can raise more capital, you can spend more on marketing. There is no digital products, to my knowledge, that has ever grown without it being engineered and paid for in some capacity. It's not enough to have a great product. You have to be able to market it as well. But having said that, we were very blessed with a lot of user love. We'd made an ambassador program, and overnight we had 10,000 people who had signed up just because they wanted to help spread the word and talk about Clue. And I mean, it was absolutely heartwarming.
That's a good segue to the next question, because you've spoken about the importance of owning our data, especially health data. How do you think individuals should be thinking about ownership and privacy when it comes to their health information and avoiding becoming the product?
You know, we started out in the time where people said, just, land grab, just get lots of users. I mean, we're also a very idealistic company. We wanted it to be free and accessible because we were like, this is absolutely crucial health information that people must have, no matter how much money they have. And so it was a big internal cultural shift to then at some point say, hey, we need to build a sustainable business. And we started out trying to say, hey, what if the product was €1? Like everybody could pay €1. It turned out that not everybody paid €1. In fact, too few people paid €1. And so we went through lots of iterations, what's the right price point and in different geography. And then eventually just realizing that the market had created an expectation that a period app is free. And if you want people to pay for it, you have to add a lot of extra feature and like a really solid, meaty product that people want to pay for. And that has taken years. So behind the paywall, you get more and more, but it's still a very helpful product if you don't pay. But, we also try to really educate our users and say, hey, if you don't pay for the product, you will be the product. We need to have a world where people pay for technology, because then we can have transparent business models. We don't sell the data. It's not our business model. Our business model is that you pay for a product that you find value in using. It's a really difficult thing to navigate for an average user. Which tech companies can you actually trust? Do you understand what they do with your data? Are they transparent? We should deeply care about privacy on our health data. I think we should demand as users that people are good custodians of our health data and they don't break our trust. On a very practical level, I will say if you choose a product that is built in a geography that is well regulated, that's a good start. And that is Europe. If you choose a company where you understand how they make money, that's a good thing. Because if you don't understand how they make money, you will probably not like how they make money. If it's something that happens sort of behind the scenes.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd love to ask you about the science of women's bodies and research. So one of my favorite books ever is Invisible Women by Carolyn Criado Perez. And you're nodding. I gather you've read her book. For the listeners who haven't read it, you should go out and buy it. It's really a great book. But it describes it in detail, a litany, but not even an exhaustive list of data bias and data gaps across science, industrial design, and yes, even medicine, where too often women are not studied at all, and instead we're just treated like small men. Science, research, data, evidence-based decision-making has really underpinned your philosophy from the start. In this competitive world of commercialization leading to world domination, how did you go about ensuring that research on women's bodies didn't just inform Clue, but that Clue would be built to contribute to the knowledge base as well?
Well, it seemed like a really meaningful thing to share, anonymized, of course, and with users' consent, data that could move female health research forward. And we tried to bring our users on board with that idea. The way I see it is that every time you enter a data point in Clue, you are kind of almost physically moving women's health research forward. That becomes a data point that a researcher can use. They learn something new. They write a paper. We take the paper, we kind of translate it into something that's relevant and understandable for our user base, so they get that information back in the app. And then hopefully also their doctor will understand something new about their body, so they get better care. So it becomes this circle of value.
Was it a challenge to do that though? Like, I'm sure you must have had people going, why are you doing that for? Let's just move over here instead.
I mean, we have spent money on it. We have hired people. We've never been paid for the data that we have shared with research institutions. But, I believe that trust is like the most valuable thing you can build as a company. And especially when you ask people to share the most intimate data about their bodies. And I believe it's the winning strategy over time. And also, we don't only exist to make money. We also exist to solve problems. And we need more research, to your point. So yes, it does make us maybe grow slower. And yes, we have seen competitors who have chosen a different path and that have been greatly rewarded for that. It just makes me say, hey, tech community and world, what do we value? And should we consider what we call success? If we only measure profit as value, I believe we have created a bunch of other types of value. And we need to start actually assigning monetary value to that value too. Like, it should be worth something. It's what's happening in the US now and what's going to be the future of Europe. And there are so many signals that shows me that that's the winning strategy, but it's a long game. And we've had investors who have had enough patience. I mean, barely, but there's been enough investors that had enough patience that we managed to do this.
That does seem to be one of the differentiators between the European market and the American market, that ability to hold on for longer and understand that things take longer to get there. But attracting capital still remains obviously a major challenge. And you've released a guide for men, which I'm looking forward to reading, and who want to or could invest in female founding, building FemTech. We know the stats on funding female founders, and Louise has made sure I'm well aware of those. They are very low. I think something like 4%. Clue's managed to raise over 17 million, which is a significant chunk of money. But from what I understand, competitors have raised a lot more, and some of those competitors don't have anywhere near your background. What's your experience as a female founder pitching to get investors on board?
I mean, it was hard. And I'm very grateful that I pitched together with a male co-founder. I think that has helped us. I see women with incredible innovation. They have market proof, they have teams, they have all kind of things, and they're still not raising. And that's especially challenging for later stage femtech companies. To my knowledge, there is no later stage femtech fund. There are now a handful of early stage funds. So it is harder than it should be. And that's actually one of the things that inspired me to write this guide. You think it's a kind of numbers-driven business conversation, but investing is very often more emotionally driven than we think. And it's a social proof. And who did I get the introduction from? And do other people think this? Like all this stuff. So trying to address some of the more sort of human factors around this, I hope will, in a way, support men in finding the confidence to invest in something that maybe feels really foreign, in people that look very different. It's a hard thing to do. But yeah, no, it wasn't easy. And I mean, we have raised relatively a lot of money, but I would say it takes a lot of money to build a big company on stage with a bunch of unicorns. And every one of them were worth $1 billion and they had all raised almost $1 billion. I mean, it was really noticeable. You're like, yeah. And so FemTech only gets peanuts to play with. There's a handful of people who have raised more than 50 million, and they are almost all men, with one exception.
Yeah. And I think like that's a point really worth making. Not all of our listeners would be across this, that, you know, it's hard enough as a female to raise money for your product. But at the same time, when you're in the space of FemTech, you'd expect to see a sort of ranking table or something, and the founders would be women. Like the people who have at least got funded would be females. And more often than not, they're male founders of FemTech companies. It just blows my mind.
No, it's very frustrating because you would think that it's mainly men who are building FemTech. It's not. It's mainly women. There are so many women building FemTech. And you know, my thing is, I would love men to be part of building FemTech. We need men to be co-founders, to be investors, but we need them to do it together with us. Otherwise, we end up with products that doesn't feel right. And we end up with companies where the power is held by men only, around something that really forms culture. It forms people's understanding of their own body. It forms our identity. And we are holding that power. But together with men, please, men, yes, come be part of this. I really warmly invite you.
Excellent. And we'll put a link in our show notes, Ada, to the guide that you've written as well. So widening it out a bit, what advice would you give to others, and especially women, who want to build in health tech or in other male-dominated industries? What tips and tricks can you pass on?
I mean, the first big one is to start. I often hear women kind of list all the things that make them not ready to start a company, and they're all about themselves. They don't have enough education. They haven't found the right co-founder. They don't have enough market research. No, just start. You will learn. It's a good thing you don't know all the things that you're going to have to learn and know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I'll say you have more power than you think. You know, when you raise money, it's an institutionalized kind of power imbalance. You're sitting in front of people who negotiate for a living, and you're doing it for the first time, but they also need you. And you can have opinion, and you can form the company so that it fits you. And also as a CEO, you can form a company culture that actually fits your life. I think that's really important to say. For instance, at one point I realized that I had too many meetings. I was like, when do you ever think? I think thinking is an underrated activity for leaders. So I decided on Wednesdays, I'm not going to have any meetings. Then that happened. So you have power. And then the last thing I would say is build a business model and do it early. And if you don't have to raise venture capital, don't do it. And then my final advice will be solve a big problem, because solving a big, meaningful problem will attract other people. Nobody wants to spend their life on building small things. So choose a really hard and juicy problem, because it'll actually probably be a fuel on your journey.
Great advice. And luckily in healthcare, we're not short of big, wicked problems that need solving.
I will say maybe just one thing about leadership. I really believe that more people think better together than one person alone. I'm a big believer in having very open conversations with your management team and potentially the whole team, and really have people think about problems together. Because what I have seen is that then you come to a shared understanding the solution. Then everybody's on board and you can move really fast. So the decision process takes a little longer, but you have a completely different kind of goodwill that builds in the organization that I think is extremely valuable. Getting people on board rather than using kind of domination power, I think is really smart.
And doing that provides a great opportunity for people to learn and grow. When I was last CEO, I would have strategic planning sessions. And like you said, every single person, I don't care if you've worked here for 2 weeks. I don't care if you're 18 years old and you don't have a lot of experience yet. And it was fabulous because everyone felt valued, and being able to grow and do that together is a great tool for mentoring as well as just a good idea for the company.
That's a really good point. Maybe if I can just tie one more comment to that. I think we often underestimate how much our personal growth and inner growth is correlated with the growth of the company. I actually think it's two very parallel lines. And I could see people in the organization, you know, once they bounce up against something where they're like, oh, I don't want to go there. It's some sort of inner trauma point or something. at some point, it just becomes a thing that eventually will make them have to leave the organization, because somehow the organization grows around them or kind of matures, and it's almost like an inner glass ceiling. And the people who are really open to keep working on themselves, they accelerate in their careers. I should also say, I'm not at Clue anymore. I left Clue 3 years ago. My heart is obviously still with the company, but I also left the board a year ago. I am in close contact. I think they are doing absolutely amazing work, but I can't take any credit for what's going on there now.
So on FemTech, if you look ahead 5 or 10 years, what innovations or shifts in the FemTech space are you really excited about?
I'm really excited about being able to look into the body on a more molecular level. So innovation that can give us data streams about hormones, I think is really interesting. People who are looking at menstrual blood as a place for biomarkers or home diagnostics for breast cancer detection, like all these things, I think is really interesting, because there's something about giving people more agency about their health journeys. It brings them in a way closer to themselves, and they have this richer data set, and they can do things that are more preventive versus kind of curing. And data is going to play a really central role. It's also things like better protocols and more research. And we need everything from like base level research all the way to a consumer product. And in between, things that we will use in a clinical settings. And then, and so to just kind of wrap a bow on that, we need more investment in women's health, full stop. And we need to understand, as I said before, that this is crucial societal infrastructure. So if we did that, we would save a lot of money as societies. We would make a lot of money building these products and services, and we would gain a lot of human capital. There is never a good reason to not invest in women's health. That's my conclusion after looking at this space for many years.
Brilliant. And we completely agree. And you're in the process, I believe, of building a think tank called FemTech Assembly. So what can you tell us about that, and how can people get involved?
Thank you for asking. I realized that we can keep helping women do better pitch training and encourage them to be entrepreneurs, but there is some systemic barriers that make this not move as fast as it could. So I really would love to work on the systemic level. And I think a big part of that is actually awareness and culture. How do we make people draw the connection between, if I invest in women's health, I will make money, we'll drive the economy, and we will have a healthier planet. It's that simple. So that's really the simple and maybe difficult aim of the think tank, to make that common knowledge, because I think that could inform a lot of investment strategies. And I would love this think tank to be some sort of platform where people can do what they're doing anyway, but have some magnifying function to their voice by banding together in this think tank. But how can they get involved? I'm very happy to receive a message on LinkedIn, and I'm still figuring out exactly how to help people get active in this space. But it's brewing, because our biggest challenge is not the other startup competitor, it's that the world doesn't understand how important it is what we're building.
And tell us about this book you're writing as well.
Yeah, this book has had a little bit of a long birth, because I started writing it immediately after I stepped back as a CEO. I realized that there are very few female founders that have written books about their journeys. And there are even less, if any, that look at what they're doing in sort of a bigger societal perspective. And I really wanted to understand FemTech and the beginning of FemTech and FemTech's role in technology and technology's role in the world. So that's what the book is about. It's about leadership as well. And it's also a very critical book on the venture capital system. I could not get it published in the US. I didn't find a publisher who wanted to publish it. So I have now decided I'm just going to publish it myself to start with. And I'm sort of pondering whether it should be a book or whether maybe it should rather just be a series of long blog posts. So I'm sort of chewing on it. And I'm also just distracted because I'm doing lots of other things. So it's a bit slow, but I really do want to share it, and it will come out, and I really hope it will come out this year. But I've been saying that for a few years.
Oh, that's okay. We'll still promote the waiting list so people can get on. You've had such an interesting life. We've only been able to touch on a small part of it and your journey so far. Thank you so much for joining us, Ida. It's been an absolute thrill to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
George. I would really love to be able to bring these podcasts to people in their ears weekly instead of fortnightly. I know that would mean you and I would have to spend more time putting it together. But, any of our listeners that love the show and would like to hear more from us, please talk to your employer. All we need is some more sponsorship dollars and we could bring Pulse to you more frequently. We had a lot of stories today, but I had 32 when I went through the list and I cut it down significantly.
I think I sent you 5 or 6 when I wake up in the middle of the night and started. There's a lot happening. I mean, this is a busy sector.
It is, yeah. And it was great to have Ida join us in the studio. She's fantastic. Her first book was actually documenting her journey on her and her father ran a motorcycle touring company. Ida's just fantastic, and I was so pleased that she was able to join us today.
Excellent.
All right, George, now, any recommendations for the Pulse Potties?
So no specific recommendations. How about yourself? Any recommendations from your perspective?
Only one, which was based on the story that we had earlier on Theranos. It reminded me of the 2018 John Carreyrou's book, Bad Blood, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup. Because I was about to invite Elizabeth Holmes to come out to Australia and present at the conference that I used to run. And I just hadn't got around to it yet, but I'd read a lot of articles and it was like, holy shit, this person seems amazing. What are they doing? And then, of course, John's article came out and it all came crashing down. And then when his book came out, I was so obsessed, I almost took the day off work just so I could keep reading. And I remember coming home on time, which I never used to do. It's like 5 o'clock, got to go. And then I was on an exercise bike reading the rest of it, just page by page. It reminded me, having that story, just how good that book is. Because one, it's a really fascinating story at so many levels. It reads a bit like a crime detective novel because it's like, this happened and then what would happen? What? I can't believe that happened. And it was a real page turner. So John Carreyrou's book, which did win the Financial Times and McKinsey Business Book of the Year when it came out in 2018, that's really worthwhile reading. So if anyone's got some spare time and wants a good book, I would suggest that one, Bad Blood.
Well, maybe we can get her husband over, interview him and see what he's got to say.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be high on his list of priorities.
I promise to not be cynical at all.
Okay. All right. Always good to have a chat with you, George. Thanks, everyone, for listening to us. And George, if you could please read us out.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to Pulse, brought to you by Pulse IT News. Pulse is produced by Ivan Jurek of Octopod Productions. Big thanks to everyone for listening. Make sure you subscribe, follow, and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, you can visit pulseit.news to sign up for the e-newsletter and explore Pulse IT's massive digital archive. Please send any feedback or topic suggestions to pulsepod@pulseit.news. We'd love to hear what's on your mind. Look forward to seeing you the next fortnight.
See you, George.
Thanks, Louise.